Members of the Committee of the Whole, we are now live.
Good evening and welcome everybody at home and on council. It's to the Committee of the Whole Operations and Admin for February 2nd, 2021. I'll call the meeting to order now, and I would ask everybody to please rise for the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness, where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who served our community and who are no longer with us, so that we may continue to do the work we must in their memory. Please be seated. Deputy Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Certainly. Councillor Utley.
Present.
Councillor Martin.
Here.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Present.
Councillor Antosky.
Here.
Councillor Vanderstel.
Present.
Councillor Weaver.
Present.
Councillor Carpenter.
Here.
Councillor Wall.
Present.
Councillor McCreary.
Here.
Mayor Davis.
Present.
And Chair Sless.
Present. Are there any members of the committee that are declarations of pecuniary interest for items appearing on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, the following items will be automatically separated for discussions. Item 6.2.1 is there is a delegation on that this evening, and item 6.1.7 as there is an amendment coming forward on that item. At this time, are there any members of council who wish to separate any items for discussion? Councillor Van Tilburg? You're muted. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. 6.1.8.
Okay. Councillor McCreary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 6.1.1, 6.1.2, 6.2.1, please.
I believe you called 6.2.1.
Yes.
Okay, that's already separated.
Great.
Okay, any further separations? Seeing none, I'll ask Councillor Carpenter, can you please move the motion to approve all items for consideration and consent not separated for discussion?
Thank you, Councillor Sless, Chair Sless. Moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Cheryl Antosky, that all items not separated for discussion purposes be approved.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. I'll now call a vote on the items not separated for discussion purposes, and I would ask that the Deputy Clerk read the titles of all items that are subject to the vote and then proceed with the vote.
Through the chair, the following items are subject to the vote. Item 6.1.3, 720 Gray Street, Reserve Dedication. 6.1.4, Road Dedication Bylaw, Oak Park Road, Wright Street and Bowery Road. Item 6.1.5, Winfield West Subdivision, Phase 6B, Traffic and Parking Control. Item 6.1.6, Debbie Crescent, Traffic Control. Item 6.1.9, Walter Street, Traffic Calming Measures. Item 6.1.10, City Accommodation Task Force Report, Update on Brantford Police Services Facility Accommodation Plans. And item 6.2.2, Healthy Kids Annual Update. I will now call the vote. All items not separated for discussion purposes carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee vote in favor are as follows. Councillors Vanderstel, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. This evening, we've got one delegation. We should note that the delegations have 10 minutes to make the presentation inclusive of questions. And in keeping with Brantford Procedural Bylaw 15.6.2, please ensure that all comments are related directly to the matter before the committee this evening. So our delegation is John Bell, Board of Health, Dr. Joanne Tobler, Chief Executive Officer, and Dr. Elizabeth Urbanki, the Acting Medical Officer of Health. And I would ask that those three please come forward and click in. I see, yep, we've got the doctors lying down and everybody else is okay. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Is that better?
That's very good. They're speaking tonight in response to the Brant County Health Unit in regards to the unsafe disposal of needles. And please note that you do have 10 minutes for your pleasant presentation, and that's inclusive of questions. Okay, and when you're ready, I guess probably Chair Bell, please proceed. You're muted, John.
Thank you. Is that better?
That's very good.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, City Councillors, thank you for giving Brantford County Health Unit time to address Council on the issue of needle syringe program and the concerns relating to it. We've done our introduction, so I'll pass on that. The watching public may not be aware, but the Board of Health is comprised of municipal appointees and provincial appointees, and the City Council indeed appoints 3 members to the board, and they're all in attendance tonight. Dr. Urbanki shared the background and rationale for the needle syringe program at an earlier meeting of council. She also provided an evidence brief to support the practices we've established. I don't intend to repeat her presentation, but rather focus on the involvement of the Board of Health and to give confidence to residents that we and the health unit as a whole are listening to the concerns raised by residents, and that we're working with city staff to deliver the most effective and safe program we can by following the known best practices in this area of health protection. A subcommittee of the board, including one of the City Council appointees, brought forward recommendations to the board on how we can further improve the efficacy and safety of the needle syringe program. Examples include the installation of 4 additional needle return bins in the city, establishment of a new position in the health unit of a drug strategy coordinator for Brant County, additional needle collection as guided by public input, and the funding for trial programs that would incentivize and increase the rate of needle return and consequential reduction of needles deposited in public places. These steps form the basis of the plan submitted to Council for their consideration this evening. I do, however, have to make Council aware that the health unit is mandated by the province to provide the needle syringe program. As such, the health unit and indeed the Board of Health are not in a position to suspend the program, even if the City Council requests us to do so. On the other hand, we hope that working collaboratively with residents and city staff, we can build greater confidence in the needle syringe program and avoid that situation. I'll now hand across to Dr. Urbanki.
Thank you, John. I'm just going to update councillors on our statistics for 2020 in regards to the needle syringe program. 84.6% of the needles distributed by the needle syringe program were collected in 2020. Of these, 86% were returned to bins at the program sites, 12% were returned to community disposal bins, and 2% were returned via public reporting. Of these, over half were returned in a protected format, so such as like in a glass or a plastic bottle. So only approximately 0.7% would be discarded improperly or unprotected. So as Chair Bell has mentioned, I'm just going to take us through a bit of the action items and some commentary to help you understand. First was the establishment of a drug strategy coordinator position, for which BCHU Board of Health has recently approved funding. This will allow increased coordination not only with community partners involved in the involved in the needle syringe program, but all involved in the drug strategy. And recruitment is underway at present for this position. Second would be the installation of disposal bins in key locations where discarded needles have been historically reported and or found. And we have BCHU has 4 bins available for immediate installation. And to this, the Board of Health passed a motion recommending the installation of bins at 4 locations. The installation of extra community bins, especially in hotspots, will give more options for safe needle disposal. The locations proposed to the city for installation are based on the mapping of needles collected across the community. Exact locations within the proposed area will be dependent on the requirements for the physical installation. And certainly our staff has been liaising with city staff on what's the requirements for installation and the best locations. Third, implement public awareness activities to shift attitudes and beliefs about substance use and the harm reduction to decrease stigma experienced by people who use substances. Those who use substances may improperly dispose of needles due to stigma around substance use and wanting to hide their use. With a shift in attitudes towards drug use, individuals may become more comfortable disposing needles through collection sites and bins. 4, to collect a comprehensive evaluation of the program, including facilitators and barriers to improperly discarded needles. This will allow us to further adjust and improve the program and further address any barriers identified to the proper disposal of needles. We will continue to monitor and respond to calls for needle pickup and map hotspots. This is an ongoing part of public health programming, and locations are used for program planning around further bin installation and outreach programming. Continue to conduct regular needle sweeps. This has been occurring by BCHU and other community partners, and this will allow BCHU to continually monitor improperly disposed needles in the community, pick up needles, and increase visibility and community confidence that their concerns are being addressed. We will continue to provide education and resources such as sharps containers, both large and pocket-sized, to people who use substances, businesses, residents, and property owners, and the general public around the safe disposal of used needles. Once again, this is ongoing part of public health programming to provide education to community members and businesses to help facilitate safe disposal of needles. And finally, we're to investigate and pilot campaigns that incentivize the return of used needles and syringes. In the short term, this would be expected to increase the needle return rate based on the experience of other jurisdictions. It is hoped that the short-term behavior change will continue as individuals get into the routine of properly disposing of needles. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Doctor. I believe we have some questions here. The first up is Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Chair Celeste. Thank you, Doctor. I'm trying to understand the stats a little bit better. I know that, a high percentage were collected, and then you've broken that 84% down further. I think it was over 50% were returned in some sort of container. So does that include, like, I'm trying to think, if somebody goes out to a park and found a couple in a water bottle and they returned that to you in a bottle, does that?
Yeah, so when we get those would be included the public pickup calls. So yeah, so that's what I meant by that. That some even though they're out in the community, they're often found protected in a plastic container such as a water bottle. So we would include those in our counts. Yes.
So it's included in the count of being in a safe container but not being improperly discarded in the first place. How is that categorized?
Yeah, so we are working on trying to really break that down further. That would be included in the 2% via public reporting.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Okay, we have about 1 minute and 10 seconds, and we have 4 speakers. So if you can make your question as quick as possible, that would be help. It's Councillor Weaver who's next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we account for any other sources where folks might be getting syringes, just to account for the large amount of syringes we're finding in public and private property, and with 84% of those being returned, I'm thinking there might be another source in the community. Are you aware of any?
Yes, certainly. There's numerous sources where people can obtain needles outside of the needle syringe program. They may be obtaining them outside our jurisdiction at such programs. Also, you can buy them at pharmacies and order them over the internet.
Okay. And I'm out of time almost, so just quickly. So just looking at section B, specifically B2, so Coburn Street and the Library Grand River Hall area. Has the library board been asked about that? And if so, what was their thought about it?
I believe our staff has reached out, but I can't, I would have to get back to you on that for sure.
Okay, perhaps one of the other library board members can chime in at some point. Thank you very much.
And we're out of time, I'm sorry, but we're going to be debating this shortly, so folks will get their opportunity to speak. Thank you, folks, for your presentation tonight. We'll be debating this, actually, that's our next item up for the agenda. So if you wanted to stick around to hear a bit of that, by all means, you're welcome to. If not, I'm sure you'll read about it or get a report back on it. Okay, but thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Vanderstel, can you please move a motion to place all the separated items for consideration not previously voted on onto the floor, please?
Absolutely, Chair Sless. You're doing a wonderful job, by the way. Items for consideration moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, sorry, Rick Weaver, that all items for consideration consent 6.1 and 6.2 separated for discussion purposes be approved.
Okay, members of the committee, the first item for consideration is the item that we just had the presentation on, the needle situation. So are there any questions or comments on that? Okay, I'll carry on with the list that I had then. Councillor Martin, you'd be first up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little disappointed to see in this that there wasn't a better explanation of what incentives they're giving for people to return their needles. I think there'd be a big incentive if they said, well, you can only have 10 until we start getting needles returned and disposed of properly, instead of giving out 100 at a time. Also, there's no indication as to the 84% of the needles that are collected, if they were all ones that were issued by the health unit. There's a chance that some of those needles came from pharmacies and other locations. So we might only be getting half the needles back or even less, because there's extra needles in the system from other sources. So the information is kind of skewed in that respect, and it's not really giving us an accurate picture of what's going on. And from the stories I've heard, it sounds like the needles is a bigger problem than what this report would let on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the incentive program, but there's no details about it. Perhaps they're forthcoming. The other part I think that the public and other councillors have mentioned to me is to actually limit it to an exchange as it is expressed to the community. That we do limit it to, a 1-for-1 until we can actually get our hands around this. There are some questions. One of the ones I wish to ask the committee, I'm glad that they came forth with the presentation. In the report, it talks about hiding the bins or keeping them out of sight. And one of the things that I'm wondering, like, I'm not sure that those bins are going to be used. I think, interesting enough, one of the areas that I have a high find rate within the community, it's not mentioned. And I think it might even have a bin there of some sort. So I'm not sure that those that are engaging in substance use may use the bins, but it's about the public having to find and pick up. And so the bins may be one step removed from them having to call the health unit, but we'll still need somebody to address those bins and their pickup and cleanup. The other part is I'm wondering why only 4? if we're doing bins, why only 4? I know that it's going to be an interesting conversation with the public about why bins. The other part is hopefully if we have an incentive program to that works, and I mean I don't know how that functions yet, but perhaps then we won't need the bins. The other concern would be if we do an incentivized program and we have bins out there, will those bins be vandalized in order to get at something that's been incentivized, because we know it works the other way a little bit. I'd just like to leave it at there for now and hear what other councillors and the mayor has to say.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. Councillor Wall, you're next.
Thank you, Chair Sless. If I'm not mistaken, the delegation can still take questions. Is that true? Great. Is anybody from the delegation here? And if you are, could I have your attention, please?
Through the chair, that rule only applies to external consultants that the city hires. It doesn't apply to delegations.
Oh,
Can I have a motion to waive the rules? I move a motion to waive the rules so that I can ask them a question.
I'll second that unless there's a way for them to actually be presenters instead of delegates in the future.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. There is a resolution on the floor which has to be dealt with before another resolution can be introduced.
Is that true? All right, I'm gonna, my questions are for the delegation. That I'm gonna just ask them on the air. Quite simply put, I'm thankful that they take us very seriously for Councillor Van Tilburg's motion, and I'm happy. I think this is a good start. I definitely don't think we are where we need to be. I would really like to seek further clarification on what exactly, to the detail, is going to be the process when one of the residents that we represent calls about a needle. Because, I mean, still to this day, Councillor Van Tilburg and I, and I'm sure many of you, get calls that they get an answering machine, or they get a voicemail, or they don't get an answer, or they get the runaround. And to me, that's the biggest issue, is when somebody calls out for help and doesn't get the help that they need. And I know that that's not anything deliberate. I know it's just one hand not knowing what the other hand is doing, or it's just a cross wire or a mixed communication. It's just frustrating when we've got to talk to a mom who just took her kid to the splash pad and ran into a needle, and then she calls one person who tells them to call another person, who tells them to call another person, who gets to an answering machine. And I just want to know what we're doing to make the members of this community feel like somebody is actually listening and cares. Because to me, this is a very complicated problem, but communication should be at the forefront. Because as long as people feel that they're being heard, then they know that there's an opportunity for us to get to where we need to be. And I feel like the health unit is just a little overwhelmed because, you know, if you haven't heard, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm sure all of their staff are taxed, and I'm tremendously thankful for the health unit and everyone who works in that industry. But at the same time, to me, there's a certain level of customer service that absolutely must be met. And I'm hearing from too many people who I represent that they don't feel like they're getting that level of customer service. And that's what I want to see. So that's all I want to say.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wall. Councillor McCurry.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Well, you know, I think the response that we had before us, God bless them, is probably the best the health unit can do these days. You know, we're looking at now we're adding more staff to the complement of folks that we already employ to service a very small percentage of the population. You know, that's got to be paid for by somebody. I guess that'll be split between the provincial government and the city government, and it's pretty much all the same pocket that comes out of. We're going to install more disposal bins in key locations, further stigmatizing the neighborhoods that these are located in. We're going to implement a public awareness campaign to shift attitudes and beliefs about substance abuse on harm reduction to reduce stigma experienced by people who use substances. And I think I heard in the delegation's presentation that people throw these things along the sides of the streets and in vacant alleys because they're stigmatized, because they can't seem to be bringing the needles back for some reason. And I think, you know, I think to some extent we're going down the wrong road here. You want to incentivize needle exchange, make it 1 for 1. I think Councillor Martin alluded to that earlier. You know, if you're going to hand out packets of 100 needles, you can expect a lot of them won't come back. And maybe it's true that there are other sources for these things, but I don't know how you account for all this debris that's in the neighborhoods, especially in the south end of town. But, you know, it's also in the north end of town. It's not specific to there, although it seems certainly more prevalent. A comprehensive evaluation of the needle syringe program, including facilitators and barriers to improperly discarding needles. Again, you know, I really think that we're chasing our tails on a lot of this stuff. I just don't know where we go with all this stuff. As I said, you know, we seem to be spending an inordinate amount of time on a very small proportion of the population and their behaviors, which impact on everybody else. I see that this is not so much a harm reduction campaign as a harm transfer. You know, perhaps the folks that are putting stuff in their arms are maybe doing a little better because they're using clean needles. But by leaving this stuff in our neighborhoods and our streets and our playgrounds and our tot lots and our splash pads, who's the harm being transferred to? And I think, you know, I think it's high time that we take a more holistic approach to what's going on with some of these programs that we administer through the province of Ontario and the City of Brantford. And I'm looking forward to the debate later on this evening when Councillor Antosky's resolution comes forward as well.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a question for staff. So we can't necessarily account for where all the needles are coming from. Is there anything we can do as a municipality to have some control over people that are giving needles away for free?
So through the chair, I'm Aaron Willis. I'm the acting general manager of community services. To the question, I'm not sure what jurisdiction the municipality would have to have oversight on that, but I can take that question away and provide an answer to council prior to this going forward to council for ratification.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. And then my next concern is I'd actually like to have the separation for B2 for the location of the library. This is out of all the locations or all the streets. This is the only location that's actually going to be inside a city facility. And so I think it's very important to make sure, we're very sure that the library board is a part of this discussion. So I would like it separated in the event that we find out the library board is on board with this, then by all means, I think we can add it in later.
Thank you, Councillor Weaver. Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Chair Sluss. I'm happy that we have this before us tonight. It is a response. It's something that I wasn't necessarily expecting. Because we've changed the way in which we record the amount of needles that come forward by weight from number, it puts us in a bit of a conflict with our city staff who fill out their find sheets by number of needles and by the location in which they're found. I've had a chance to review some of that. And if we're recording by weight in one area and by needle find and location in another, I can see that this can add some added unnecessary layers to our heat maps. If there's a change in location of the majority of the needles, we'll be comparing two different sets of numbers and we won't be able to augment each other's finds. And that goes for all the organizations who are contributing, the individuals who find them, you know, the BAA, I'm not sure if they were contacted. I'm concerned that we're not necessarily recording the same type of data in the same way. So we can't necessarily respond en masse based on what everybody's finding. I'd like to be part of this discussion for an extended period of time so that we can find out how better as a service community we might be able to contribute, not only to the data collection, but also to the response. I mean, I really don't believe that 4 box locations are going to be the end all be all to service this exchange or drop off issue. I think they're going to move around. I think we're going to have a fluctuating problem. So if it's at all possible in the future, perhaps at a future council meeting, we could get a little bit more detail about how we can augment each other's efforts here. I would sincerely appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderstel. Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Chair Celeste. I'd also like to weigh in on the incentive projects or pilots, and we don't have detail here because it does state that they're going to investigate ways to do that. And in theory, I think the one-to-one is the right thing, except I think it's far more complicated than that because needles are available everywhere else. So I think we need to look at things that are more creative than that. The one-on-one, they're just going to go and get them somewhere else because they need them. So I'll look forward to see what we come up with and what's successful in other communities. But I do agree with the doctor in terms of a change of attitude. And as Councillor McCreary mentioned, we're going to be talking about that more later tonight. And this is about everyone. This is not about a small percentage of people. It's completely accurate that people who are not involved in drug use are also being negatively affected. And this is trying to address all of that. And it's very complicated. The numbers have spiked significantly all over Canada, especially since COVID has hit, and they expect to record the highest number of opioid overdoses in a quarter since they've been tracking this. So it's something we need to pay very, very strict and lots of attention to, and it's complicated, and we'll have further discussion on it later on. But I think the incentive is part of the trick. I just don't know how we get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe this original resolution was passed November 24th. And I do believe it was also copied by our MPP, Mr. Will Boma. And I haven't had an email, maybe I missed it. Anybody else get an email from Will Boma saying what the provincial response was to this? Because we did hear from the health unit that this is a provincially mandated program that they must do what the province tells them to do. So the problem here is the province not listening to us. That's the first thing. I know we're not supposed to criticize the government, especially this one, but I think that we should at least have a response from our MPP. That's, of course, the job that they're elected to do. Secondly, I didn't hear from the health unit. I heard a percentage number. I didn't hear how many needles. I heard a percent, if 86% of return, for example, how do we know what that number is out of? We're finding thousands and thousands of them in our community, but I didn't hear a number. Maybe I missed it. Maybe I missed it with the MPP's response, but quite frankly, the resolution was directed there and we have yet to receive a response, or at least I have. Maybe somebody else has. Maybe someone could speak to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a real problem with the word with needle users feel stigmatized. So they feel they can just discard their needles anywhere they want. This is no different than people that discard their face masks and coffee cups and bottles. People just don't care. Not everybody, but there's a small number of people that just don't care. Let somebody else pick it up. So I don't feel there's the word stigmatized is accurate in any way whatsoever. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Utley. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sluss. Well, we've learned a fair bit since last November. And I think what we've learned is that, the problem with this resolution is that, it conveyed to the community that this council and the city actually has control over the needle collection program or can exert control. And actually what we learned at the health unit, I should point out that Councillor Sluss and Councillor Van Tilburg sit with me on the health unit board, and we are a minority there. There are 4 provincial appointees and 2 county appointees. But what we learned there is that the Ministry of Health has made it very clear that program is mandated, that the health unit must do it. And if the health unit doesn't do it, they'll see someone else does. And I understand their position. Their position has been lost in this debate. And the reason for the needle collection program is lots of data has shown, and we heard that from Dr. Banke in November, that the rates of HIV and hepatitis skyrocket, and creates in every single patient who's hepatitis or HIV, the burden on the medical system is like $250,000 and more per person. So it's an attempt to control, it's a public health measure, an attempt to control healthcare costs. But what I was hoping for in November by supporting the resolution is that the health unit would do a better job of collecting the needle program to deal with the nuisance and the harm that it potentially causes to residents in this city. And I'm pleased to report to you that the Health Unit Board has taken this very seriously. And there has been much discussion at the board, and a subcommittee was formed, and Councillor Van Tilburg sits on that subcommittee. And they were tasked with the purpose of how do we improve this program, because there hasn't been a lot of examples of other cities across Ontario or even in Canada that have done a great deal to improve the program. So in some ways, we're breaking ground, moving away from what communities normally do. So what you've seen tonight is, you may not agree with all of it, but it is an action plan that the health unit is putting in place, pushed by the board and given direction and approval by the board to do this. It is a bit of a work in process. I know you're looking for information. How do you incentivize and what that program looks like? You know, again, there haven't been many examples or templates that can be used, but this I can tell you that the health unit realizes that a better job has to be done. The board of the health unit has made decisions and will continue to make decisions on that basis. And I can also assure the members of this council and this community that those of us from this council, again, we're a minority on that board, but myself and Councillor Van Tilburg and Councillor Celeste, you can be sure that, you know, we're going to keep a close eye on this. We're going to continue to work with the other board members and with the health unit staff to make sure that, you know, our program hopefully will become a model for the province. And in some ways, that's one pitch we've made to the province. If we do some things here that are a bit different and do a better job of collecting needles, it'd be great to have some funding, and maybe we'll be able to get that as a pilot program, and hopefully our MPP will work with us. So the system isn't perfect, but to pretend that we here at this council can change the program through resolutions, obviously we found out that's not going to happen. So I generally tend to be a realist when it comes to these things, and my goal is to make sure the program we have here in Brantford is the best we can possibly have. And I think that consensus is forming at the health unit to do that. So I look forward to it. It's like I said, it's a work in process. There's more to come. But as I told the health unit, I don't care what the province has said and what they mandate. If we can't improve this program, then it'll lose public acceptance in our community, whatever it has. And the public pressure will become overwhelming and irrefutable to terminate the program, even though the province says we have to do it. So I'm hoping it doesn't come to that, because obviously there's some real important healthcare issues that this program addresses. So together with what we're doing later this evening, and I think from what you'll hear from me later this evening, we are making progress in our community in dealing with the opioid crisis. But clearly there's more to be done, and no one's saying this is the final word. It isn't. There'll be more to be done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor. I let you go over a minute, so you've used a minute of your second speaking opportunity, should you wish one. But you were on a roll there, so I just let you go. Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yes, I'd like to ask staff on how would we circulate the report to our community groups, neighborhood associations, the downtown BIA. I'd like to know how to do that in order to get their response before this comes to council. I'm sure there will be a number of concerns throughout, and I would like to hear them, especially if we have organizational structures to move through. Could anyone answer that?
Through the chair, I'll provide a bit of an answer, and then certainly if our director of communications is on the line, I'll let her chime in. But it is a public document. We can certainly circulate it to the groups you mentioned, the neighborhood associations, the BIA. How we'd gather up that feedback, I'll pause there. I have some thoughts on how we could do that, but I'll pause there and see if Maria has done a process like this before and what she may have in her toolkit.
She's still looking for her kit. It would appear maybe Maria is not on this.
Okay, I can take that away through you.
Call, so
through you, Chair. I can take that question away and work with Maria on it.
If you could, Aaron, if you could let Maria know and we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
that would be great. Thank you. Okay, are there any further members wishing to talk to this item? Seeing none, we've asked for a separation has been asked for B item 2, which was the library location. So I'll ask the clerk the deputy clerk to take the vote on everything except B number 2.
Item 6.2.1 without subsection 2B carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows: Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Marn, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Can we now have the vote on the item 6.2.1 B item 2, please?
Councillor Sless?
The recorded vote on subsection B2 of item 6.2.1 is lost on recorded vote of 5 to 6. Members voting against the motion are as follows: Councillor Vanderstelt, Martin, Wall, Van Tilburg, Utley, Weaver. Those 4, Mayor Davis, Councillors Sless, Antosky, Carpenter, and McCreary.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Our next item is 6.1.7, and I believe Councillor Vanderstelt, you have an amendment to that. If you'd like to read your amendment and identify your seconder, please.
I do, Councillor Sless. Thank you very much. Moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, Rick Weaver. Let me bear with me for a second here while I call it up here. There it is. That item 6.1.7 be amended to add the following clauses: that staff be directed to engage the residents in the affected neighborhood and Ward 1 councillors for the purpose of urbanizing the east side of Delamere Street and the north side of Ed Street, and investigate options to mitigate legal parking on the south side of Ed Street adjacent to Lions Park, and that staff be directed to report back in Q3 2021 with feedback from the affected neighborhood, preferred options for safe pedestrian access to and from the trails, options for mitigating illegal parking, Ed Street and Delamere Street improvements, and recommendation for funding the capital improvements.
Okay, did anybody wish to speak to the amendment? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, could you please call the vote on the amendment?
The amendment to item 6.1.7 carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows: Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, Weaver, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the amendment or on the motion as amended? No, seeing none, could you please call the vote on that then, please, Mr. Clerk?
Item 6.1.7, as amended, carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Vanderstel, Slash, Marn, and Toski, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you. The next item that was separated for discussion was Councillor McCreary, 6.1.1. Councillor McCreary.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. This is the revised accessibility policy for the City of Brantford, and it takes into account some changes that have been made. And I'm just wondering if there's a staff member present that could briefly touch on exactly what the changes are. It wasn't clear in the report. The policy is quite clear, but I'm not sure what we're coming from and going to. Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's Jenny Sawicki, the Accessibility Coordinator. The changes that I was referring to in the report is, since the last version of the accessibility policy, the customer service standard was absorbed into the integrated accessibility standard. And it just changed the way everything read. I just wanted the policy to be more transparent and straightforward to our constituents.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jen.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Thank you, Jenny. Further discussion on this item? Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and through you. This is, I think it's full-time employees of the city, and so I'm considered full-time. So I had to take some training. It was about a 3-hour-long course having to do with the accessibility issues, and it really was an eye-opener for me, because the perspective of the course was from those who have a disability, and how important it is to them that, because we're a public organization, that how we present our services and how we deal with our residents take that into account. And there was something, you know, for example, videos that are on the city's website. You may have noticed that there's now captioning on that, so that those who can't hear, who have a hearing disability, so they understand what is being said. That's just a small example, but the training also included some very, very specific examples of how to deal with residents that come into the customer service desk who have issues where they have, maybe sometimes they have a personal support worker or a dog, whatever it might be. And I think the key here, and I think the organization has certainly taken this on as an important priority, and that is, you know, it's incumbent upon us as a public service organization to serve everyone as best we can. And is it difficult sometimes to accommodate disability? Sure it is, but you know, it's important we do it, plus it's the law. But I've got one question that I think many of us would be interested in, and that reference I just said to videos. So I'm gonna ask staff, not sure you're gonna answer it. Some of us in our own personal Facebook pages, you know, we do videos. And so I don't have the resources to do that, the caption, although I'd sure like to be able to do it, but tough in this budget year to do that. But so do those rules and restrictions apply to us? I mean, I would like to aspire to doing it, but can we do it now still the way we're doing it, which is pretty informal videos without doing that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. If your personal accounts are not tied to the city, you are able to create those YouTube videos without captioning, though realizing you may be excluding some of your followers. If there's any tie to the city, there's an obligation for captioning.
And tell me, is there an affordable way to do that? I'd certainly like to investigate that. I would suspect some of my fellow council members might as well.
YouTube itself has an option that creates an auto caption. So that is free and available to everyone. However, you do have to ensure the accuracy of the captioning.
And I guess the problem is if you do it on YouTube, you can't then download it. So to use it on your own Facebook page. But are there other programs out there that we might be able to use that are inexpensive that will help us do that?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can look into that for you. The other option, say for example, if you were to post on Facebook, is to, within the caption of the video, not the caption, but the text that you are able to put in as your status, I would recommend putting the key points of your video in that so they have access to that text.
So Jan, do you mind doing that then? I think that'd be benefit to myself and other members of council. You know, if there's a program or software we could use that might be able to do that for us.
Sure, I can look into that for you.
Great, thanks very much, Jan, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Van Tilburg.
Oh, it looks like we need technology to the rescue here. I have a question for Jenny. Does this reflect like what we're doing on Zoom now? And when these are posted on YouTube, because I don't believe Rogers does closed captioning of that, how would one address the text of the closed captions? If like I'm sorry, just a little bit beyond me, and perhaps you, but if there's someone that can answer that question, how is that done, or who does it?
That's falling under Maria's team currently, so I'm not sure exactly what those actions look like.
Very good. That was it. That's my question.
Okay. Any further? Seeing no further discussion, Deputy Clerk, could you please take the vote on this?
Item 6.1.1 revised accessibility policy carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows: Councillors Vanderstel, Celeste, Marn, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. The next and final item that I have separated here is 6.1.8. That's the Park Ave east of Murray Street one-way traffic, and that would be Councillor Van Tilburg.
I just separated this to thank Councillor Wall. One of the most interesting things that occurred was that this was created just from an encounter with Councillor Wall and a constituent, and he chose to follow through with it. And what's interesting is that, yeah, he was wrong, except he wasn't, in that the direction that somebody had originally just in a thought of making Park Ave one way. Once we went to the public, once this motion went and said, ask the residents, they said, you've got it wrong. It needs to go the other way. They didn't criticize what was done. They said, here's how to bed. So the thing that really gets me about this, that I really like, is that the engagement of the public, staff listening to that engagement and agreeing. Now, I have my questions now fall to staff on the road itself, and that is, how often have we taken a two-way street and made it a one-way street? I know that we have a number of smaller streets that has happened to, and just what's the process and how do we make sure the neighborhood, like that's to me is a major change. How do you get the neighborhood ready for a two-way street, changing to the one-way street so that people don't wake up one morning and make the wrong turn exiting their driveway? What's the procedure to keep it safe? And the other part is, I'm sure we'll get some feedback after we make the change, but when I looked at the stats, generally your odds are pretty good when you get that a higher, much higher numbers. I think it's like 6 to 1 in regards to those that thought it should be changed this way. So small streets shrunk that need to go to one way. What's the procedure and the safe way to go forward?
So through the chair, in the hands General Manager of Public Works, to the councillor. So the first question, just how many streets? We can get that information for you if you'd like. I don't have that off the top of my head. In regards to safe streets, and it's really about education to the homeowners. So we'll provide thorough door knockers if we need to educate the homeowners through that way. And then if we have to further engage, we will before any signs are changed. One thing we are noting is that parking will remain on the same side of the street. So that's helpful as well. And because of the engagement that we've done already through the resolution, they are aware, the residents are aware right now that this is a change that will be coming. So we'll further engage before anything is done with the affected residents.
Thank you. That is all.
Okay, Councillor Curry, you had your hand up. Did you take it down?
Mr. Chair, I did. I had actually asked to have 6.1.2 separated. I just wanted to remind the chair of that.
Okay. Noted. Thank you. Yes, we'll deal with that next. Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Chair Celeste. So yeah, just a couple quick thank yous on my end. First and foremost, to the constituent who stopped me on the side of the road to talk about this originally. Definitely a huge thank you to all the people on the street who responded, who made this possible. And just a huge shout out to staff for getting it done in such an expedient manner. I actually talked about this a whole bunch in the last 2 weeks, just as an example of the kind of counselor I want to be and the kind of issues that, you don't really know what people want until you talk about it. But I do remember standing on that corner, and I don't know if it was coincidence or just maybe it was more frequent than I thought, but a car was literally coming off of the road as another car was trying to turn onto it, and neither one of them could go because there wasn't enough room. And I was like, yep, this is an easy one. And I called staff and we drafted up the motion, and yeah, now we're here today. So props to the municipal process. What an exciting job we have. So thank you, and I hope for support from council. You guys are amazing, and staff as well.
Thank you. Councillor Carpenter.
I'll support this. I always support the ward councillors, but I just wanted to give them some history. I think Councillor Van Tilburg asked. Wellington Street, Darling Street were one ways, two different directions, and have been converted back to two ways. So we've done this in the past for the whole length of streets, let alone just a block. So congratulations to the ward councillors for fixing what is a long-standing problem at the top of that hill on Murray Street. Thank you.
Good. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Deputy Clerk, could you please call the vote?
Item 6.1.8, Park Avenue east of Murray Street, one-way traffic, carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows: Councillors Vanderstel, Sless, Marn, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you. The next, I think now and final item is 6.1.2, which is the payday loan update. And I believe that's Councillor McCreary.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I do have, through you, a couple of questions of staff. I'm just wondering, currently we have, until recently we've had 10 licenses issued to 10 independent, we believe, operators in the city of Brantford. One has since closed. Now we have 9 that are operating. I wonder if city staff have done corporate searches on each of these trade names to verify whether or not there are 9 individual companies or whether or not these are trade names operated by a smaller number of companies.
Through the chair to Councillor McCreary, Jill Binkley, Supervisor of Licensing. So what I can tell you in the licensing system that we issue, we have maybe 1 or 2 that are owned by the same parent company, but the licenses are all issued individually to each location.
Okay. Is it to our benefit to learn whether or not a smaller group of companies controls a multitude of these outlets?
Through the chair, certainly we can do a little bit more research on that, and we could verify against the articles of incorporation that are supplied to us. So we could certainly do that and report back to council.
Could you have that for us by council date? Jill, would that be possible?
Yeah, we would have everything on file, so it'd just be a matter of auditing the files at this point for council.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I'll tell you why. We tend to look at this as a social justice issue, and quite rightly it is. But having this number of outlets within our corporate boundaries clearly satisfies a need that the public has, albeit perhaps driven by all the wrong necessities and motivations. But I'm just wondering if we can ascertain how many of these are owned by the same folks, and whether or not we are in fact reducing competition by reducing the number of licenses. I think that's a question I'd like to have fresh in my mind as we vote on this at council, Jill. So if we could have that provided for us, I'd appreciate it very much, and thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Fine. Thanks, Councilor Carpenter. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, can we please have the vote?
Item 6.1.2, payday loan establishment licensing update carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee vote in favor as follows. Councillors Vanderstel, Sless, Marn, and Toski, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you. That brings us to our resolutions. And the first one, 7.1, is support for seniors advocacy bill 186. And I believe that's Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you, Chair Sless. It's moved by myself and seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Cheryl Toski. Whereas seniors face various systemic challenges regarding access to programs, services, and systems of support, and whereas it's important to safeguard the interests of older adults, their caregivers, and their families, and whereas Kitchener Centre MPP Laura May Lindo has recently introduced Bill 196, an act to establish a seniors advocate, and whereas Bill 196 establishes a seniors advocate who is independent officer of the Legislature Assembly, whose function is to advocate in the interests of seniors and family members of seniors who act as caregivers. And whereas the seniors advocate role will advise in an independent matter the minister, public officials, and persons who fund or deliver senior services on systemic challenges faced by seniors, policies and practices to address existing systemic challenges and other matters that may come to the attention of seniors advocate. And whereas seniors advocate is required to prepare an annual report on the activities of the advocate, the report may include recommendations relevant to preventing and mitigating the systemic challenges faced by seniors. And now therefore be resolved that the Corporate City of Brantford supports Bill 196, an act to establish the seniors advocate, and that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the MVP of Brantford and to the MVP Kitchener Centre and the Association of Ontario. And I just want to say that the legislature has passed this. It's in committee level now, so in all three parties have agreed that this is the right thing to do, and they have passed this to committee. It's in committee now at this point. It hasn't received final royal assent yet until it comes back from committee, but there is support amongst all members of the House for this bill, and I just like to lend our support to it as well. I think it will be helpful for all Ontarians seniors when it comes forward with the advocate to make an independent, and anybody that reports the advocate information is held safe too. They're not they're held in confidence, so kind of like a whistleblowing protection, so it's covered as well. So the legislation is well written, and I would hope all my colleagues would support this.
Yes, a very good resolution. Are there any other speakers? Seeing none, could you call the vote, please, Mr. Deputy Clerk?
Mr. Chair, if I may. Mr. Chair, if I may.
I'm sorry, you may. Sorry.
That's okay. And I know they often confuse Councillor Carpenter and I. I just want to say that I recognize his long-term advocacy for seniors issues. The councillor has been the champion on this council for as far back as I can remember. And I'm happy to support the resolution that he's bringing, and I'm pleased to see it has the support of everybody on both sides of the aisle at Queen's Park.
Very good. We'll try the vote now.
Item 7.1, support for Seniors Advocacy Act Bill 196 carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor as follows. Councillors Vanderstel, Sless, Marn, and Toski, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you. The next resolution is the census report. That would be Mr. Mayor.
Very much, Mr. Chair. And so this resolution is moved by myself. It's seconded by Councillor Antosky. And it is as follows. Whereas over a century, Canadians have relied on census data to tell them about how the country is changing and what matters to them. And whereas we all depend on key socioeconomic trends and census analysis to make important decisions that have directly impact our families, our neighborhoods, and our businesses. And whereas in response to COVID-19 pandemic, Statistics Canada has adapted to ensure that the 2021 census will be conducted throughout the country in the best possible way using a safe and secure approach, whereas residents completing the census will have a direct impact on gathering data needed to plan, develop, and evaluate programs and services such as schools, daycare, family services, housing, emergency services, roads, public transportation, and skills training for employment. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation City of Brantford supports the 2021 census and encourage all residents to complete their census questionnaire online at www.census.gc.ca. Accurate and complete census data supports programs and services that benefit our community. And if I may, Mr. Chair, can I speak to it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, censuses have been a large part of the English way of governing. Actually, they go back 1,000 years to Magna Carta when there was really the first census. And, you know, since then, it's proven to be, you know, a very important tool for governments. But more than that, and I'd say this, I understand that, I mean, I don't like it if government intrudes in my life any more than necessary. But I think when it comes to the census, it's well proven over centuries that it is an important task that any government takes on. And, you know, through it will provide the most accurate, extensive, and primary source of data on the nation's economy and population. You know, and that data is used in a number of very important ways, some of which I have seen personally as mayor. For example, it's used for something as simple as determining ward boundaries and the boundaries for ridings, MP, MPP. It's all based on population. So you got to know how many people are in a particular riding and how that's changed. You know, it's also a critical tool for many businesses. And I've heard that time and time again at the Economic Development Board and staff, that, I mean, many businesses use the data that comes out of the census to make very important decisions. And these could be large or small businesses, you know, about their business, about investments they want to make, where they want to locate, and perhaps expansion plans as well. And it's also critical to make sure that, you know, provincial and federal programs are delivered as efficiently as possible, and that the funds are properly allocated to the areas where it's most needed. So even though participation in the census is, you know, mandated by law, I'm asking people to willingly participate in as a very small part of the duty we owe one another and to our country and province, a citizen's duty type arrangement where you're doing a little bit that has a very major impact on improving our community and especially future generations, where decisions are being made based on the best available data that we can get out of the census. So please participate. You can do it online. It doesn't take very long. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other speakers to this item? Seeing none, please call the vote, Deputy Clerk.
Item 7.2, 2021 Census Report carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Vanderstel, Marn, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. The next item up is Stop the Harm. I believe that's you, Councillor Antosky.
It is. Thank you, Chair Sless. Moved by myself and seconded by Mayor Davis. Whereas the opioid crisis is one of the largest public health emergencies of our lifetime, with a death of, on average, about every 2 hours and a death toll of nearly 19,000 since January 2016. And whereas other countries have significantly reduced drug-related fatalities with reforms such as legal regulation of illicit drugs to ensure safe supply and decriminalization for personal use. And whereas the federal government has indicated it is premature to discuss these measures until there are comprehensive supports for people to get well. And whereas supports are needed, but measures to save lives are essential if people are to survive and access supports. And whereas the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police has stated that they agree the evidence suggests decriminalization for simple possession as an effective way to reduce the public health and public safety harms associated with substance use, causing government to indicate that it is now deliberating over decriminalization. And whereas the overdose crisis rages, showing few signs of abating, therefore be it resolved that A, the Government of Canada declare the overdose crisis a national public health emergency so that it is taken seriously and funded appropriately. And B, the Government of Canada immediately seek input from the people most affected by this crisis and meet with provinces and territories to develop a comprehensive pan-Canadian overdose action plan, which includes comprehensive supports and full consideration of reforms that other countries have used to significantly reduce drug-related fatalities and stigma, such as legal regulation of illicit drugs to ensure safe supply of pharmaceutical alternatives to toxic street drugs, and decriminalization of personal use. And C, a copy of this resolution be sent to the Federal Minister of Health, Patty Hadju, Christine Elliott, Ontario Minister for Health, Moms Stop the Harm, Phil McColman, MP for Brantford, and Willem Boma, MPP Brantford. And D, FCM call on the Federal Minister of Health to declare the overdose crisis a national public health emergency, and that the federal government urgently adopt a comprehensive pan-Canadian action plan with the goal of eliminating opioid overdoses and overdose deaths in Canada. And may I speak to it, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. First, I will just note there are some minor changes made to this from when you saw it as a notice of motion, and the changes being who we are sending it to, so some of our other levels of government, and also the addition of FCM, as if this passes, as we are members of FCM, we would sponsor this to move forward for FCM to adopt it as a resolution. I know that this is counterintuitive for a lot of people. It feels like a controversial and an uncomfortable motion. And so I would urge people to do a little bit of research before they react. This does not mean we're legalizing drugs. That is not what this is about. This is about decriminalizing for personal small amounts. It's been proven, there's over 30 countries that do this now in different levels, and some more effective than others. The two countries that have shown some great success are Portugal and Switzerland. And they've seen successes in many different ways, from reduction of, it was mentioned earlier tonight, reduction of HIV and hepatitis, and an uptick in people voluntarily accessing services. Oregon is just, they call it Measure 110. They're adopting a lot of the principles that Portugal and Switzerland has. And what they're doing is pairing decriminalization with increased access to health services. So we know it doesn't work. It doesn't work charging somebody criminally who is using an illegal drug. They go to jail, they get out. We've done nothing to address the problem. We're going to keep doing that over and over and over again. This is to have it recognized as a health issue and to be funded properly. There's a lot of information online. As I mentioned earlier, the modeling is showing the modeling projections to June 2021 suggest that the number of opioid-related overdose deaths could substantially surpass those seen at the height of the opioid overdose crisis in late 2018. So this is not going away. It's getting worse. We need to pay attention. We need to do things differently. And we need to do this for the people who are struggling with addiction and for the rest of our community. So I'm hoping that council will get behind this, do some research to understand how negatively this is affecting our community, and will continue to do so. and that we lobby the other levels of government that are responsible, but we're at the front line of it and we need their help. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sherilyn Toski. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I may have to take 2 speaking opportunities, but first of all, I want
I'll let you know when you're half done.
Okay. First of all, because I have 2 parts to this, and one is, how are we doing locally in terms of the opioid situation? And, actually, it's a good news, bad news story. We've had the number of opioid-related deaths, and this is coming from the health unit, still going to be confirmed for 2020. But, last year 2019, there were 40 deaths in our community from opioid overdoses, many of them brothers, sisters, family members of many residents in the city. Fortunately, last year, that dropped down to 20. And so, that was very good news. Health unit is analyzing how that happened. It could be luck. It could be obviously doing a much better job of what's called harm prevention. But disconcertingly, the number of opioid overdose incidents actually increased. So we're actually doing a better job at saving people, which is only temporary. I mean, it doesn't solve the problem, but it is helping to obviously, if someone has passed, they can't be rehabilitated. Also, there's other things happening locally. You heard from the health unit that through direction from the board, they are hiring a drug strategy coordinator, which is an important position to help coordinate the local drug opioid strategy. There hasn't been a coordinator for about 1.5 years. And so the local strategy for dealing with this has become a little bit disjointed. For Councillor McCreary, I'm sure you'll be glad to hear we're using funds that actually are in a reserve that are there from monies that the province had gave us in the past that haven't been allocated to other uses. So it won't impact the property taxpayer this year. Also, the local healthcare team that's being formed, I'm led to believe that this will be a major focus for them. Despite that good news, the good news across the nation is not good. This is a hidden epidemic that has just been grinding away through COVID. Not as much notoriety because obviously we're all focusing on COVID, but we're seeing across the country very dramatic increases this past year in opioid-related overdoses and deaths. Fortunately, we haven't seen that here, but we're seeing it across the country. You've probably read about in Toronto and BC. And, it's reached the point now where this is the #1 cause of death for people under 30. And for the first time in generations, the life expectancy, average life expectancy is declining. We've all, I think, taken a lot of pride over the last 100 years that every year life expectancy increases. Now, for the first time in a century, it's declining due directly to the opioid overdose epidemic. And so why this focus on a national strategy? Well, everything we do here locally is really determined by the national strategy, if there is one, because all the money that is spent here, we don't have the money here on the property tax to the city to fund these programs, nor is it part of our jurisdiction. So the monies that come down to us from the federal and provincial government, they determine the programs we use locally. And you can't change your strategy because the federal government, the provincial government won't fund innovative strategies. And the problem we have is, the province is developing a strategy based mainly on rehabilitation, which is great. But the federal strategy is really, I don't even know what it is. And it's a national epidemic. We need a national strategy. It's high time that the federal government took this seriously because they're the major funder and they have responsibility in some areas for health, plus the criminal court system.
You just used your time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Put me down for #2, please.
I will. Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought that was a cowbell ringing in the background.
Yeah, he got loose, but I caught him. It's okay.
A little bit of a distraction. Mr. Chair, do we know if the overdoses of opioids come from prescribed meds or illegal street drugs or a combination of both? Are there any numbers that that we can access that can substantiate that. I don't know if there's a staff member to answer that tonight. Anyone? No one?
Sorry, Councillor Utley, through you, Mr. Chair,
Oh,
Chair
thank
Sluss, just to not leave you in the lurch here, Councillor Utley, I just said we don't have that expertise on our staff. It's really a question for BCHU, so they would have more data on that. So I can ask them by email tomorrow and maybe respond with that question.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. Councillor Van Tilburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the midst of a pandemic, Canada is in the midst of a crisis. Canada's in the midst of a crisis. And federal government isn't doing much about it. Something needs to be done. The problem is that what needs to be done is probably going to be the biggest question. I believe this resolution is a minor, very minor step in the right direction. I think that decriminalizing the victims is a wise move. A person that falls into to the level of addiction and their lives have collapsed around them, I don't think they're a criminal, though they do a criminal act. So that is one minor thing. But right now, things are focused around what I think is ineffectual. Service providers providing revolving door service. And we have no institutions and no way to actually help people. You have to remove people from the environment that is plaguing them. And if you take somebody and they manage to get through that door the first time, when they walk out that door, whatever information they've been given, they're back in that environment. And that is the most difficult thing. They're being refed. And man, people are dying and it's getting worse. And I'm frustrated like I've never been before. And to think that it was just a year ago that I had experienced my first physical watching of an overdose, not recognizing it at first. And to know that less than a year later, that person is no longer with us, no matter how many times naloxone and Narcan, or whatever you want to call it, were used. When you call it harm reduction, it's not a solution. We have to get beyond that. Harm reduction is a Band-Aid. And eventually that person is actually playing Russian roulette and their odds will end. It doesn't end well. And what we're seeing with the level of addictions and the level of the crisis that's hitting all the communities is that more people are being affected. My gosh, when you're talking about the #1 cause of death under 30, and we know it's growing, that means it's going to get worse. And we need action, and I'm trying not to swear, but we need action. And honestly, that discussion's got to happen in a lot faster context to deal with a crisis that is enveloping us now. One of the things that I believe we need to address is the lack of institutions that people can go to and stay at and be free from their environment that is holding them in a prison. That prison right now is an open area when your life crumbles to nothing, when you've lost everything and you're out on the streets, wandering our cities in the cold, and your only respite is your next fix. The videos that I've been seeing, that people send me and say, Brian, what can you do to help this person? Isn't going to be helped just through decriminalization. We need to do more. It's well beyond the city council. It's actually well beyond the province. The province needs federal money and a plan, and I'll tell you, I know they'll do more. Service providers providing revolving door solutions.
Councillor Van Tilburg, your time's up. Did you want to go back on the list?
I'm not sure if I'll have to. I hope people have the understanding of what I mean.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. Councillor Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be wholeheartedly supporting this for a variety of reasons. Most of the reasons have been stated, but there's a few other ones that I think are very important to the municipality. So by decriminalizing this type of drug use, I think that's going to actually be a savings to our police department, which is a savings to the taxpayer, because he won't be dealing with these scenarios any longer. City services should also be impacted in a positive way when we're dealing with these type of critical incidences that occur throughout our facilities. I'm sure all of us are aware that there have been overdoses in city bathrooms as well as public bathrooms, and homelessness. Homelessness is one of the biggest things I think our council has tried to deal with this term. And this is just part of that process, because if we don't resolve those issues why people are homeless, we're going to just continuously be paying money to house people, and then they'll go off of housing and they'll come back in. It's really just a circle, and we're not fixing it. We have to break that chain, and this would be a good first step. So again, I hope the rest of the council also supports this, and I thank Councillor Antosky for bringing it forward.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Weaver. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. And that's what we're doing by locking up people who have drug addictions. They need treatment. They don't need to be put in jail. And as Councillor Weaver mentioned, taking all this to court frees up a lot of court time. It frees up police time and allows them to do a more serious thing, which is go after the drug dealers. Those are the ones that we need to nail. Councillor Utley asked a question about prescription versus street drugs. And I think what part of the problem is they take the prescriptions that are usually in a patch form, and they have a way to concentrate that so that they can get the high. In the patch form, it's going to be a slow enough release that you don't get the high from it. It's for pain relief. But when they concentrate it, now it becomes deadly. But it's the drug dealers we have to go after. And part of the problem is the methadone clinics. They're not being used properly. They're not being used to get people off drugs. All they are is a Band-Aid to help them limp along until they can get their next hit. And we need to take a serious look at the whole methadone program and get that working the right way instead of just legalized drug dealing, which is what it amounts to the way it's set up now. So hopefully, I think this is going to pass tonight, but hopefully the government will see this as the need to make some changes, because what we're doing now isn't working, and we need to make some serious changes on how we're dealing with this issue and do something to resolve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Wall.
Sorry.
Okay.
So I received my agenda package like everybody else, and I read this and I was completely ready to just hear the conversation, raise my hand and support it. And then just something here about the conversation that we're having and some words in here that have triggered me, and I just want to talk about it. So the words are that the government of Canada declare the overdose crisis a national public health emergency, that it can be taken seriously and funded appropriately. And it's just so tragic that it isn't taken seriously. Like, I don't think I know a single person in my social circle who hasn't had a family member or a friend lost to this. People I went to high school with that aren't here. A couple of years ago, I attended a funeral for a friend who had an overdose, you know, and it's just disgusting. Like, what are we doing? You know, what is the government doing? And I know that that's a question that I get asked, and then all of a sudden I'm part of government, and it's like, what am I doing? Well, first and foremost, I'm absolutely supporting this, no doubt about it. But what are we doing to stop guns and drugs from even coming into the country? Like, where's the accountability? A pandemic hits and they lock everything down. They shut everything down. We can do it when it's a virus, but we can't do it when it's sorry. Don't understand it. And I hope that they do take it seriously. And I do hope that they declare it a national public emergency, because that's exactly what it is. Every day, somebody is dying. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but I forgot that there are also people I know who, because they got addicted to drugs for whatever reason, you know, whether it was somebody gave it to them or they did it themselves or whatever reason, they became a drug addict. But then their entire life was ruined because of it, because they got sent to jail or they got sent to prison. And good luck trying to find oh man, there are few people who are the exception to the rule who get arrested with a drug charge and turn their life around and become like this amazing contribution to society. But for most people, the system just keeps them down and it's broken. And I hate to say it. I just want us something done. And I'm sorry I'm getting emotional about it, but this is an emergency. Thank you, Councillor Antosky, for bringing this to the table. Thank you to every one of my colleagues here at this council table, because I know that you take it seriously. That's why you're speaking about it. That's why you're supporting it. Enough is enough. Let's draw the line. Let's figure this out. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Wall. Councillor McCreary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me say what a great job you're doing tonight, John. I'm going to support this as well. I'm pleased to see it come forward. As Councillor Martin said, the course of action that we followed for the number of living generations in memory certainly hasn't been working. And given the ready availability and addictive nature of opioid drugs, we're probably in the worst spot now we've ever been with respect to drug addiction and the negative impact it has on society in general. So I'm wholeheartedly in agreement with this. Folks should not misconstrue this as a vote of 11 people to legalize drugs, because that's not what this is all about. What this is about is encouraging the federal government, which I might add certainly is the worst federal government I've seen in my lifetime, who can't seem to manage one issue, let alone several. They really can't seem to get out of the gate with respect to this issue. You know, we have fentanyl that's pouring into this country from China. We have homemade drugs that seemingly are impossible to stop. And then you look at, God bless them, our legal system, who will let a guy out with 3 years for selling fentanyl on the streets in Brantford. And generally after being incarcerated because they shouldn't be getting bail for a charge like that, a lot of times they just walk free the day of the court sentence. It really is madness to see what goes on in this country. We've come to normalize people shooting up in front of buildings downtown in alcoves. Shooting up, it's accepted as normal in this society in downtown Brantford, and not just here, elsewhere, of course, right? We're just, as I said earlier, we're completely on the wrong track as a society with respect to this issue. God bless Councillor Antosky for bringing this forward today. And I see it's going to a number of people that hopefully will take some positive action on this. I hope this may come forward from other FCM member communities as well. And if it didn't originate there, I would hope that Councillor Antosky has widely shared this with everyone else to make sure that this happens and happens in short time. The City of Brantford, if I recall, is part of an action against some of these pharmaceutical manufacturers. And I think maybe we really need to take a look at how the City of Brantford can weigh in on some of what happens with respect to the criminal justice system here in the Telephone City, because again, we're without stepping in it personally, I think we're completely off the rails here with respect to what crowns do, with respect to what justices and judges do. And it was refreshing to see one case where the justice actually overruled the joint submission lately between Crown and defense and actually sentenced an offender to the time that they deserve to do for this. So congratulations, Councillor Antosky. You have my wholehearted support.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll weigh in here. I will agree with everything that's been said about this. We need a national strategy. Even our community strategy, it wasn't that long ago that MPP Dave Levac through the last summer got us some addiction beds. We didn't even have an addiction center in the community until then. And even at that, it's haphazard. I mean, the group's trying to do their best, but you know, as has been said, you know, you have an addiction, the drug dealers get somebody that's addicted, and that becomes their dealer. And in order for them to be able to supply themselves, they must become a dealer to make enough money to be able to afford to supply themselves. And that creates more dealers. And that's why this pandemic grows. The structure itself it creates the pandemic in drug addiction. And then we have an addiction center, but we have people into a program for maybe 6 to 10 to 16 weeks, and then they're put back out in the street. And then they don't qualify for social service, the right social service, at least, so they don't qualify for don't qualify for all the funding. So we need to have addictions. The whole process needs to be looked at from a federal standpoint, from a right across the country standpoint, providing housing for those that get off of addiction. That once they still always be an addict, but they don't have to be using, and get them to be able to be someone. Then they become the new volunteers that will be working or volunteering in the centers to help other addicts, because the best help an addict can have is someone that knows what they're talking about, that knows what the experience is like, knows how to get them off of it, and see success in front of them. We don't have a system like that. I don't see one anywhere. In fact, I see what happens with addiction is it becomes a business. Even the treatment of addiction becomes a business in itself, a government business, but a business nonetheless. And the process is broken right across all different levels, whether it be the funding from social services for the funding for the individual, whether it be housing for the individual that after they're off the drug abuse, or they're not addicted anymore. We don't have the resources, and we don't have. And right now, the addiction services are the provincial's responsibility. And we don't, and they're still struggling to try and figure out how to get it right. So Councillor Antosky is quite right. It needs to be a federal program across the board, where funding that goes to the provinces from the federal government for healthcare has specific mandates to it about what needs to be happening. And we can do the same thing with long-term care. We can see more of that starting to happen, that the federal government's going to have to dictate to the provinces across the country on healthcare dollars and where they go, so that they actually go there and we actually see some results. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Mr. Mayor, you got your second four.
Yeah, I got wound up there. So I'll give you an idea of the scale of the problem. So much of the fentanyl comes from China. And I could have in my hand, the palm of my hand, enough fentanyl that would create thousands of doses. And so it's very small, it's very minute, it's very intense and concentrated, and it's diluted when it gets into the country. But do you realize how difficult it is to deal with that? There's 2 million pieces of mail that come into the Vancouver sorting station each month from China. There's just no way they can, and that's why the police chiefs and customs said, the scale of the problem is so immense that they can't deal with it in terms of, certainly they do what they can, and more is necessary. But, to think you're going to close the border is just, it's impossible, which is why the states, a much richer country than us, and their war on drugs, where's that gotten them? It hasn't worked. And so, this motion says, let's as a nation learn from other nations that have done a better job, such as Portugal, such as Switzerland. And that's not, as Councillor Antosky said, it's not across the board will supply with drugs. That's not what it is. It's certainly the penalties, for example, Portugal and Switzerland, for those who deal in drugs it's still a very high penalty. It's still part of their police enforcement, but it's the users. And when you start throwing users in jail, as people have said around the table here, you're not solving anything, because in fact, you make it harder for them to recover, because once they get into rehab program and they're finding housing, or they want to get a job, they got a criminal record, it's very hard for them to carry on with the rehabilitation program. What you've done in terms of criminalizing them is making it 10 times harder for them to recover. So it's a program that, as everybody's said around here, it just hasn't worked. It hasn't worked in this country. And the stats confirm it. So we're seeing in BC that a different approach that seems to be having some success, kind of modeled in some of the European programs. But as we have said, the national government on this issue is pretty much missing in action. They are funding, but there's no coherent strategy that I can discern at a national level to deal with this. And so it's important you take it serious as a federal government. I don't care what partisan government is in power, deal with it. Come up with a national strategy with the funds and the resources to truly make a difference in this issue. I'll say one thing that people have mentioned. One thing that's important is, well, we can help on that, is working with the youth of our community and keeping them out of that lifestyle. Because once they're into that lifestyle, you can't save everybody. So the more effective, longer term solution is obviously rehab, et cetera, and better rehab programs. But it's working with our youth to keep them out of that lifestyle. And that's why I'm so excited about what we're doing with our community centers. You know, we're diversifying some of our community social service programs into our community center hubs, the Healthy Kids program you're going to hear about in 2 weeks. It's all a recreational program in our city that's not just about recreation, it's about lifestyles and mentoring. Everyone spending more time with the youth of our community and helping them and showing them healthy lifestyles. That longer term will have the most impact. It's a generational thing. We're not going to solve this drug issue in 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, but we need a good national plan. It'll help us in terms of our local strategies. We have a very coherent national plan. Monies will follow whatever the plan is. And then as communities across the country can then adopt and follow the plan. And the country—
You're there, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, the country can come together in a really effective plan. So thanks very much. I could go on much longer, but you won't let me, so I'll stop.
No problem. Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Chair Celeste. I'm going to repeat some of the things that have been said here tonight, and I thank my colleagues for a lot of the comments, but I do think that they bear repeating. This is about the money being in the wrong portfolio. You know, someone who has a health issue, the money to help them is in the criminal justice portfolio. This needs a shift. These people need health supports, and we need our police to be going after the supply. So this is a social issue. This is an issue that has transpired and has ebbed and flowed, and now it's time to look at that and change where the money flows. We need to focus on the supply. A lot of the information that you'll read, you'll now see is separating overdoses and poisoning, because so many of the overdoses are with fentanyl laced. They think they're taking something else. There's the fentanyl, which has got a much higher toxicity rate, and so they're relating to that as being poisoning now. And you know, Councillor Van Tilburg is right. We need to do more. This is a start. Let's put the money where it needs to be. Let's have a cohesive strategy. I will say that the opioid crisis is a priority for FCM. It certainly is on their radar, but when I checked this out, there has not been a resolution brought forward by one of the members. So to Councillor McCreary's point, that's what Clause D is here. That's designed for me as your representative and a board member of FCM to bring this to the board. I did see when I was looking at some of the other resolutions that have been passed for other municipalities, and I haven't looked through them all yet, but Halton Hills is seconded by another board member from FCM. So this will get this in front of the 80 board member, 75 board members, and get, you know, put more pressure on it. So that's what I'm asking you as your representative. Let me take this to FCM. Let us push this to the national level. This resolution, the basis of this resolution came from a group called Moms Stop the Harm. And this is made up of a bunch of mothers who have buried their kids. And they are adamant that they're going to do whatever they can to not let that be someone else's child. None of these kids were criminals. They got caught up in something. They got the wrong stuff. One of the statistics for 2020 in Canada, this is a Canadian statistic, between January and June of 2020, so 6 months, there was 2,670 opioid toxicity deaths, of which 97% of them were accidental. So I know there'll be the detractors out there will say, well, how do you know it was accidental? All right, let's not say it's 97%. Let's say it's 80%. Let's say it's 70%. Let's say it's 50%. Does it make it any better? These people are dying. Parents are burying their kids. Colleagues are burying their workmates. Partners are burying their partners. This needs national attention. I thank all my colleagues for your comments tonight and what I think is going to be support. And I will do my very best to make sure that Brantford, as a sponsor of this resolution, gets action from FCM to move this forward to our federal government. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. Are there any further speakers to this resolution? Seeing none, I'll ask the Deputy Clerk to take the vote, please.
Councillor Vanderstel, we're just waiting for your vote.
It hasn't come up. Please vote in the affirmative for me, Chris. Thank you.
Item 7.1, stop the harm, carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Members of the committee vote in favor as follows. Councillors Vanderstel, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Chris. The next resolution is Diana Ave parking control and bicycle lanes. I believe that's you, Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Chair Sless. Yes, Diana Avenue. Whereas on-street parking is currently prohibited on both sides of Diana Avenue from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. And whereas Diana Avenue residents have requested that the current parking control be repealed to provide overnight on-street parking on the east side of Diana Avenue, and whereas Diana Avenue is part of the Bicycle Route 5 connecting West Brant to Canesville, as outlined in the City of Brantford's multi-use bikeway implementation and design plan. And whereas pavement markings, this is important, pavement markings on Diana have not been completed because of the previous uncertainty regarding the adjacent land use. And whereas the existing bylaw, no parking zones on Diana Ave that were previously approved by council anticipated left turning lanes that are no longer required. Now therefore be it resolved, A, that parking prohibited from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. be repealed on both sides of Diana Avenue from Shellard Lane to Blackbird Drive. B, that parking prohibited at any time be approved on the east side of Diana Avenue from Shellard Lane to a point 80 meters south of the center line of Shellard Lane. And C, that parking prohibited at any time be approved on the east side of Diana Avenue from Blackburn Drive to a point 62 meters north of the center line of Blackbird Drive. That parking prohibited at any time be approved on the west side of Diana Avenue from Shellard Lane to Blackburn Drive, and that designated lanes for bicycles be approved on both sides of Diana Avenue between Blackbird Drive and Shellard Lane. And this is what the amendment will be about, small amendment, Mr. Chair, that the implementation costs for parking control signage, designated lanes for bicycle signage, and pavement markings not to exceed $9,000 be funded from the operational services operating budget. And G, that any necessary bylaws be presented to City Council for adoption. And speaking further to it, Mr. Chair, there's just one slight change, and that is for F. It's just a change in budget, whereas at the end of that sentence, be funded from the operational services operating budget, be changed to, I think everybody's got a copy of this in their email folder, be funded from the capital budget, TS 1705, which is a more appropriate use of our funding in this area, because unlike the situation we encountered in Ward 3, where we had too many lines on the road, on Diana Avenue here, there were no lines on the road. So it appeared as though it was a raceway, directly parallel to Veterans Memorial Parkway. And it caused so much fear in the area because people didn't seem to know where to drive, what line, what side of what line that wasn't there to drive on. And they raced down there and scared the local residents quite badly. When we had the fully built out section at the corner of Blackburn and Diana, which was, well, it was intended for a shopping mall at that point. It's all residential now. So we have a better determination of what the uses in the area are, what the traffic flow in the area is. And it's important that we get these markings on the road as soon as possible, but also take into account all of the other uses and potential uses that we'll have in the area as well. So outside of that small change, Mr. Chair, for F, that instead of be funded from the operational service operating budget, we changed that to be funded from the capital project TS 1705. Outside of that, there isn't too much more explanation I can give. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderstel. Any further discussion on this this item? Who was your seconder? Councillor Weaver? Thank you, Councillor Weaver. Okay, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question through you to staff. Is this something that would qualify for the provincial funding that was utilized for the bike lanes on Memorial, since this is an active transportation project that will encourage bike lanes?
Yeah, Mark Jacklin, Director of Operational Services, through the chair. Yeah, that's actually where the capital funding is going to be coming from on this project, is from the OMCC funding.
Okay, glad to hear it. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Seeing none, please call the vote, Mr. Clerk.
Chris, I no longer have the option to vote. Please vote in the affirmative for me. Thank you.
Item 7.4, DNA Avenue parking control and bicycle lanes carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councillors Vanderstel, Sless, Marn, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Councillor Van Tilburg, can you please introduce your motion to waive the rules to introduce a resolution without prior notice of motion? Bearing in mind you need 2/3 majority to move forward.
Very good. Motion to waive the rules, moved by myself, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Wall. That's section 1511.5 of the procedure bylaw regarding the introduction of a resolution without prior notice be waived in order to introduce the following resolution. 7.5, repark, no repark bylaw within the downtown. Whereas the repark, no repark prohibits a person from overextending a 2-hour and 3-hour parking restriction through relocation of a vehicle to another street location, a person is therefore prohibited from reparking a vehicle at another on-street location in the downtown as defined in section 31 of the city's parking bylaw 144-88. For a period of 5 hours from the start of the initial period having parked the vehicle on street. And whereas constituents have requested that during the pandemic, the repark, no repark bylaw be temporarily suspended. Now, therefore, it be resolved that A, staff be directed to temporarily suspend the enforcement of the repark, no repark bylaw until May 31st, 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. I don't believe there is a debate on the motion to waive the rules. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Clerk, but I don't believe there is.
Through the chair, that's correct. It's only to the merits of the actual action of waiving the rules. So you are correct.
Yes. Okay. Could you please then call the vote?
Affirmative for me, Chris. Thank you.
The motion to waive the rules to introduce a resolution without prior notice carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Members of the committee vote in favor as follows: Councillors Vanderstel, Sless, Marn, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Councillor Van Tilburg, if you could introduce then your motion, just the title is fine, and your seconder.
Repark, no repark bylaw within the downtown, and my seconder is Councillor Wall.
Okay, we're open for discussion. Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to support this. And this is as good a time as any to try this no parking out. It's always a difficult issue with downtown from my experience on the BIA. And so, you know, this is, let's see how it works. It's temporary in nature and may provide some good information that we can utilize in the future. And thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg, for introducing this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. Mr. Mayor. I've started the clock.
You won't need the 4 minutes. So I'd like to know from if there's a member of staff that could speak to this, please, because I know this has been considered by our Emergency Operations Center or Committee. So a member of staff could please explain 2 things. Please, we have all the information that we require to make the decision. 1, so why is it staff or not? They certainly have not been supportive of this, or at least what concerns staff have about this. And 2, what is the position of the BIA, and have you been able to confirm that today with the BIA?
Certainly, through the chair, the first question. So through the EOC, I did bring this forward. We had a discussion at that time with the BIA in regards to the repark, no repark, and it was recommended to EOC that we don't move forward with temporary suspension of the repark. And that's simply to help with the curbside pickup, snow plowing, because we are in the operation of snow plowing, and the fact that we heard from the BIA that they weren't in support of it. So we reached out again today, and again, we were told that that the BIA was not in support of this resolution.
So, Mr. Chair, this makes it a really tough one because there is a need or request by residents who live downtown who are, they're working from home, many of them, and they'd like to be able to park close to where their apartment is. And of course, we have the businesses downtown, such as those that are still operating, and there are some restaurants, et cetera, doing the pickup and drop off. And so the ability for their customers to come close to their business and quickly come in and out is important to them. And that's what this repark bylaw is all about to some degree. There was, I think the Emergency Operations Committee did make a decision that parking in the parkade is free till the end of February as sort of a compromise. So I haven't quite decided how I'll vote on this, but clearly there's different viewpoints and different interests in our downtown, but that's nothing new to us. We know that. And this is a tough one to resolve because no matter what you do, it affects somebody. But I'll be interested in hearing what other members of council have to say.
Okay, we're Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yes, I indeed had a discussion with the BIA, and their position remains the same as it has always been, and it's one that I understand and I sympathize with. I also can't support their position at this time. The area in effect is significant. It is far bigger than where many of the businesses are. It comes from one side of City Hall all the way through the downtown and down Market Street and up through. So it's in a lot of residential areas as well. And we are in different times, so that everyone's life is in a bit of a different state through this pandemic. And one of the things that is noticeable is that our downtown is much like a ghost town, and that when you see numerous parking spots available and someone can't go out, run an errand, come back and park their car again because you can't be here twice. And I mean, see, what people don't understand is that it works both ways. You'll have a person that lives in the downtown residence, has to run out, run an errand, come back. They're not allowed to do that any more than somebody can go from one business to the other in that zone. They're not to come back for a certain number of hours, and people have schedules of timelines, and it's quite frankly, I understand everybody is stressing out over this. One of the things that the BIA did mention to me that I do understand completely is that when we had this come before us before, and we had the parking not enforced, people hogged the streets, and the businesses that were affected, because a lot of the business is restaurants and takeout, that was problematic. And so I agree with that. With the difference here is that people still have to move their cars, and they can't move them back into the same location. They'll have to move to a different location. There are many parking spots around those streets downtown. If anybody, I know we're not traveling a lot, but if you were to go down there, you would find it's quite sparse, like very, very sparse. And so I believe that it is sustainable and doable under these circumstances, and that we can try to alleviate some of the hardships of people who live in the community to the downtown, the greater downtown, quite frankly, because the bylaw goes farther than what we traditionally call the downtown. And I don't think that it's going to have the effect that the businesses are concerned over. I believe people will be moving along. We will still have parking enforcement, and they will be enforcing our bylaws as they are for the 2-hour parking. It is just a repark provision that will be suspended in a temporary measure. That's how I'd like to end this at this moment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Chair Celeste. I also think it's a good opportunity to try it. We're under different circumstances. This is one bylaw that has always baffled me. You know, even when businesses were open, you know, if I want to support local, I might want to run 2 or 3 of my errands together, which means I'm going to stop in front of one business and do something, and then I'm going to drive over to the other one, and rather than go to a big box store where I can do everything at once. So it always seemed to me like it would be beneficial to the businesses, but I understand that the businesses don't feel that way. So I think this is a great opportunity to see how this works out. And, you know, as Councillor Van Tilburg said, this also goes for the residents working down there. And I'll be supporting this for a trial.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Chair Celeste. Through you to whoever might be able to answer it, the response that we got back from the BIA, were they specific about which areas of the downtown, which businesses that weren't necessarily happy with it and don't approve of it?
I'm Mark Jacklin, Director of Operational Services. Through the chair, basically this actual area is just between Bridge Street, Nelson Street, Water Street, and Clarence Street. So it's at about, you know, area. They were really concerned about the pickup rate and along the downtown, especially with the businesses that are open for curbside pickup and the restaurants. That was really what their big concern was.
Okay, and based on your conversation with them, was there any appetite for actually having a specified designated area for curbside pickup to which these rules do not apply to support the businesses in those areas?
So through the chair, we have not had that discussion with them.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Perhaps there's some wiggle room here. We don't own a business in the downtown core, but if we did, I would certainly work with the BIA to try to find middle ground here. We've never been to COVID before. COVID came to us, and we have to deal with the situation while showing support for our local business people. If there's a way, a manner in which we can designate some temporary parking spaces as curbside parking spaces, which are set apart during this period, I would be willing to either move that as an amendment or second it based on the rest of the conversation that I hear tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a good resolution. I'll be supporting it. And might I suggest that the time freed up for the parking enforcement officers, that they utilize their time to go to some of the schools at drop off and pickup time and ticket the people who are parking across driveways and parking illegally too close to intersections, so that we can start to curb some of the bad behavior around schools at drop off and pickup time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. Similar to what Councillor Vanderstel was saying, I wrote this down during the discussion. I don't know why the EOC and the BIA hadn't worked this out before. I've only heard the BIA doesn't want it because of past practice. I get that when we're not in COVID times, and our engineering staff not supportive of it because they like to plow both sides of the road when they're empty. I get that too, but this is COVID. It's a different time. We're supposed to be more helpful to the residents that are working from home, especially those that, there's a lot of residents that live in that downtown section. And as Councilor Vanderstel said, it'd be very easy for us to know which businesses are open for curbside pickup. And in fact, just make those designated parking spots for those businesses, designated curbside pickup spots. You could never park at them just to pick up only. That would help those businesses. And because there'd always be a spot in front of that business, not one that's temporary for 2 or 3 hours, as it is currently now, but one that would be always there for curbside pickup for those businesses to assist those businesses doing better in the downtown core. You think the BIA might have come up with that, as a responsibility to the business improvement area downtown, and those business owners will pay them an extra levy in taxes to represent them. That would have been a good suggestion. So I agree with Councilor Vanderstel on this. When this comes back to council, hopefully the BIA can identify the businesses that are open downtown for curbside pickup, and we can exclude them specifically in this resolution when it comes to council, so that they can actually have that. And then we've done them a favor. And we've also done the residents a favor at the same time by allowing them to leave their car in a place because they work from home. This is not a difficult thing to solve. It should have been solved some time ago. We've been a year into this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Just through the staff, do you need a resolution to take that direction to poll these businesses and identify the locations that would require curbside pickup designation? Can you take it as direction here now, or do you need a resolution directing you that? Do you need an amendment?
To the chair, I think it's best to put that in an amendment to reach out to the BIA, similar to what we do with regular engagement on the street to the residents.
Okay, thank you, Indy. Okay, did anybody want to move an amendment?
I'd be happy. Councilor Vanderstel beat me to the punch, so if he wants to move it, I'd be happy to second it.
Councilor Vanderstel.
Either way, it's good to work together, Councilor Carpenter. Thank you.
Okay, well, would somebody like to do something?
I would like to move the amendment that we investigate the opportunities with our partners in the BIA to provide curbside parking for the businesses that require it during this COVID period.
And Councilor Carpenter, are you seconding that? You're seconding that, okay. Okay, to the amendment, Councilor Van Tilburg.
Yes, to the amendment, and not to throw the BIA under the bus. Let's be clear, I went on a 2/3 vote to bring this forward tonight. I spoke with the BIA earlier today. That is not enough time for the BIA to give an official response. They are reaching out to their members. Obviously, they could not get back to us for any kind of presentation of that, but I know that today, earlier this afternoon, they were reaching out to their members, and I believe we'll probably get some positive feedback on that. So I'm supporting this amendment in order to work with the BIA to help alleviate the problems downtown. Again, don't take it all in one note. We've had a discussion. This is far too quick for them to respond. And so I had said, well, you'll be able to come to us in council with what you have found, right? So I mean, this is a good amendment. It's going to reach out. It probably will make them feel more part of the process than me pouncing on them. So I very much appreciate the resolution, the amendment resolution.
Any further speakers to the amendment? Seeing none, then, Mr. Clerk, could you please call the vote on the amendment?
Through the chair, we're just waiting for Mayor Davis to cast this vote.
Yeah, Chris, I'm having trouble with it coming up, so my vote's in the affirmative, please.
The amendment to item 7.5, repark/no repark bylaw within the downtown carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee voting in favor are as follows: Councilors Vanderstel, Sless, Marn, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Okay, now we're speaking to the motion as amended. That would be you, Councillor Wall.
Well, you know me, never turn down an opportunity to talk, I suppose. So I'm exhausted talking about parking in the downtown, to be perfectly honest. It's just a big conversation and it warrants its own meeting. I've lived and loved and worked in the downtown for a really long time, and I got a lot of phone calls from constituents and emails and texts and tags on Facebooks, business owners. Compromise. I think that's the word that I want to settle on. We've got to compromise. We're in the middle of a pandemic, right? Like, I had one woman call me and she was just like, it doesn't make sense. Like, how come I have to go out and move my car and then move my car? Like, it just, I don't envy our staff, because I understand that they've got a responsibility to make sure that traffic flows and that it's safe and that the snow can be plowed and that there's a place for the garbage trucks to stop and the recycling trucks to stop. And, you know, like, I get it. I fundamentally get it. But at the same time, compromise. We have to compromise. And that's what I'm thankful to Councillor Van Tilburg for moving this motion. It kind of seems from reading the room that it looks like this is going to pass. So I'm thankful for this council. Last thing I want to do is upset all the business owners downtown, though. You know, they're a big economic driver for this city. I mean, you know, our downtown is the heart and soul of the city, if you ask me. And but people live downtown, and the province is saying, stay home, don't go out, and they need a place to park. Before the pandemic, they had a plan. They got up every day and got in their car and left the downtown. Now they don't. And compromise, right? That's what I was saying. So that's where I'm going to kind of stay with this. I hope the BIA can understand that we're not doing this to spite the business. We're doing this to support the people who reside in the downtown. And ultimately, there has to be some balance. But I am 100% all about having a large, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I want to have a conversation about parking in the core, because it needs to be had and we need to figure it out, because every other day they're talking about a new skyrise or a new building or a new development or Conestoga or Laurier or bringing more people here. Like, we've got to figure this out. And oh boy, this is going to be fun.
Further discussion on the motion as amended? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, could you please call the vote on the amended resolution?
Item 7.5 as amended carries unanimously on recorded vote. Members of the committee vote in favor as follows: Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Marn, Antosky, Wall, Weaver, Utley, McQuarrie, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. That brings us to notices of motion, which there are none. And that brings us to adjournment. So I guess I'd like to thank everybody for this evening. You took it easy on me and I appreciate that. So we'll see everybody